At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
Warmer Buddy Low, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN family of podcasts, and we've got a great podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Steve Gardner. He does great work over at USA Today. He is their main guy when it comes to fantasy baseball. Does a great job of really looking at all aspects of baseball, and we're going to be asking him about teams and players that he sees a little bit of upside with this season, how the rule changes could play a little bit of an effect. We're also going to be diving into how whether or not the ball is juiced up a little bit more or not could be impacting the way that we look at some of these games as well. So we're going to get some nice general chatter with him in segment number 2, and I do think that it is very important to be looking at bust-out players, and Steve, one of the best in the business at being able to do so. We're going to be chatting with him in segment number 2. In the final segment, a little bit more of a small card today, as we've got 5 games on the betting board for this MLB Friday, but still some good rambunctious action. I'm going to give you guys picks and analysis on all 5 games as we touch them all. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Got in a few questions today. I know that some of you guys were asking what happens if there's a game that has a line that is relatively tight on yours, and typically I will wait until the AM on more of the tight lines, because I know that I was also asked if I bet everything overnight, if I bet day of game, what have you, and it all depends upon the situation. If I've got a favorite that I think should be like minus 150 and I'm finding them on a relatively pick'em line, and I think that this team is going to come in on them, absolutely, I'm going to be taking that pick'em line right away. I'm going to run, not walk, to be able to lock that one in. At the same time, though, if I make a game of pick'em and the book has minus 105 both ways, since I do not put in the juice because I'd be giving myself less than 100% probability of there being an outcome, so that would not be great. So if I've got my line at minus 100 / plus 100 both ways, book has minus 105 on both sides, and I don't find a lot on the run line, that's when I'd be waiting to see what happens in the AM, and you're going to find with all these games, they're going to have some sort of line movement. Like, I know that the Astros versus the White Sox game was one that you guys were taking a look at, because overnight, half the books had a 7, half the books had a 7.5, and then if you had like a 7, it was very heavy juice on the over. On the 7.5, there was very heavy juice on the under. That's one of those where, once again, I'll wait until the AM was able to find a little bit of value when it came to a 7.5, more around that minus 110 range, and that's how I determine my play on that one. So I do take a look at a little bit of line movement with that regard, and I do think that that is very important because I'll fire it on quite a bit overnight, but when it comes to tighter situations like that, I am a little bit more inclined to hold off, see what the market is showing me in terms of value, and then lock that in. So those were really the biggest questions, and I'm sure that there's quite a few out there. If you've got anything that you want brought up on this podcast, just fire that in at gunit_81 on Twitter. We've got 7 months of baseball, so if something doesn't come to mind right away, but it comes to mind in a week or two, just fire that in at any time. We've got plenty of time to be able to dive into those, but let's take a look back at everything that we saw on opening day in baseball. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Now, due to the fact that the Greg Peterson experience on VSiN is from 9 to midnight, I have to do this before we see a conclusion on the 4 West Coast games, but we've gotten a final on all the East Coast games. So I will be cleaning up the West Coast games tomorrow, and I'll probably just be doing a lot of that moving forward. aside from weekends when the Greg Peterson experience is off on VSiN. But we did see the Tampa Bay Rays get a nice 4-0 shutout win over the Detroit Tigers. Shane McClanahan, who was banged up towards the back half of last season, he looked much better in this game, looked more like himself. 6 scoreless innings, 6 strikeouts, 1 walk, and then from there, Pete Fairbanks, Jason Adam, Colin Pooch, the guys that you all know and love for the Tampa Bay Rays, they were able to give you a scoreless inning. Jose Siri, he got a home run, and so did Wander Franco, as both of those come in really the middle of the game for Jose Siri. He was able to go deep off of Eduardo Rodriguez, who he gave up 3 runs in 5 1/3 innings, including that home run. The other home run comes off of Mason Englert. Hopefully I'm saying that one correctly, as he gave up a run in an inning. You did have Chasen Shreve come in for a scoreless inning, and Jason Foley, part of a Detroit Tigers bullpen that actually wasn't too bad last year, 2/3 of an inning scoreless. The Atlanta Braves take it to the Washington Nationals 7-2 as Patrick Corbin picks up right where he left off last season, making people money by fading him. Now, not all of this was his fault. You had 3 errors in the field by CJ Abrams. That was terrible. Patrick Corbin, he pitched badly. He didn't deserve quite that big of the short end of the stick, as he gave up 4 runs in 3 innings, but only 2 of which were earned. He did allow 7 hits and 3 walks, so that's not so great. From there, Erasmo Ramirez and Mason Thompson actually held down the fort. A combined 4 scoreless innings between those two. Hunter Harvey gives up nothing in his inning of work, and you got the over thanks to Kyle Finnegan, giving up 3 runs, 2 of which were earned in an inning of work. For the Nationals, they go 1 of 11 with men in scoring position, as Max Fried did not look sharp in this game. He gives up 1 run in 3 1/3 innings, was lifted relatively early. Lucas Luetke was able to give you an inning, gave up a run along the way, but really the wholesale approach for the Atlanta Braves, as Dylan Lee, Jesse Chavez combined for 2 scoreless innings, AJ Minter a scoreless inning, and Colin McHugh 1 2/3 innings scoreless. So the Braves, they get it done. Not what you want to see on the Max Fried front, but overall, you were able to get a win opening day. For the Milwaukee Brewers, they weren't able to get a single run opening day, 4-0. The Brewers fall to the Cubs, as Corbin Burns did not look to be in peak form. 3 strikeouts, 4 runs allowed over the course of 5 innings. Bullpen wasn't bad, as Peter Strzelski, Javi Guerra, and Gus Varland all pitch a scoreless inning, but for the Milwaukee Brewers, just 4 hits in this one, as Marcus Stroman looked very good. 6 scoreless innings, 3 walks along the way, but still very good. Brad Boxberger, Michael Fulmer, Keegan Thompson all lend scoreless innings from there. You did see a slugfest breakout in Boston. The Red Sox fall to the Baltimore Orioles 10-9, as Corey Kluber, he did not have it on this day. He gave up a pair of bombs, 3 1/3 innings, gives up 5 runs, all of which were earned. A very big day for one of the top guys in all of baseball, in my opinion, Adley Rutschman. The Orioles really turned around when he got called up to the big leagues last year, and he went deep off of Kluber, and then the other home run came off the bat of Ramon Urias, who was able to get his first of the campaign. Kyle Gibson, he got the win, but didn't necessarily look so great. That's the biggest kryptonite you've got with this Orioles team. He gave up 4 runs over the course of 5 innings. Bullpen from there, which was very good for the Orioles last year, not so great. Felix Bautista, he gives up 2 runs, 1 of which was earned. Now, you insert by a pair of errors by Cedric Mullins along with Ore Mateo, but he still gives up 2 runs in his inning of work. You had a pair of guys in Logan Gillespie along with Brian Baker combined for an inning. They gave up 3 runs between the 2 of them, while Cionel Perez, Keegan Aiken, they come in for scoreless innings. And for Boston, bullpen is not the forte of this team. Caleb Ort, he gives up 2 runs over the course of 2 innings. Last year he had an ERA that I'm pretty sure was north of 8. Not great there. Ryan Brazier, he gives up 3 runs an inning. You did get 2/3 of an inning scoreless out of Zach Kellyan, scoreless innings out of Josh Winkowski and Chris Martin, but not what you were looking for out of the Boston Red Sox pitching, though. I will say their big-time offseason signing in Masataka Yoshida, very solid day, as he was able to supply a pair of hits. You did have the Minnesota Twins pitch a shutout, 2-0 in the debut of one Pablo Lopez, 5 1/3 innings scoreless. So he did his part for the Minnesota Twins. Caleb Theobar, Griffin Jacks, Yohan Duran all deliver a scoreless inning, and pair of outs out of the bullpen from one Ore Lopez. And for the Minnesota Twins, just a lot of small ball. They go 4 of 11 with men in scoring position. Zach Greinke takes the loss. Not a bad performance. Gives up 2 runs in 5 1/3 innings. Problem was the Kansas City Royals got 2 hits on this day, as Amir Garrett, a pair of outs out of the bullpen, and then Don Coleman, Jose Cuas, Carlos Hernandez, they all lend a scoreless inning. But when you score no runs, it's hard to be able to win a game. The Texas Rangers and Philadelphia Phillies played a game that was open for runs. 7-11. The Phillies score 7, the Rangers score 11, and the Rangers get the job done. Not the debut that Jacob deGrom was looking for with the Texas Rangers. Gives up 5 runs in 3 2/3 innings. He had 7 strikeouts, but you can tell that he just did not look like himself. Bullpen from there didn't do a terrible job. Cole Reagans gets you an out of the bullpen. Jose Leclerc, a scoreless inning, and then you have Brock Burke give up 1 run over the course of 2 innings, and then you do have 1 run given up in 2 innings out of Jonathan Hernandez. And for the Rangers, they went 5 of 5 with men in scoring position, with Robbie Grossman being able to go yard, and you also got a home run off the bat of Brad Miller. As for the Phillies, as bad as we saw Jacob deGrom look, Aaron Nola had the exact same stat line. He gave up 5 runs in 3 2/3 innings. Gregory Soto comes in from the Detroit Tigers. He gave up 4 runs, 3 of which were earned, and he didn't get an out. So he's currently got an infinite ERA. Connor Brogdon gave up 2 runs in an inning, and then you did have Andrew Bellotti, Matt Strand both give you a scoreless inning, and 1 1/3 scoreless out of Andrew Velasquez, but yeah, that was rough, as you did have an Alec Boehm home run in this game for the Philadelphia Phillies. So Phillies offense looking solid. The pitching, that was not so great, and Aaron Nola's home and road splits continue to be an issue. The reigning champion Astros begin the year with a loss, 3-2. The Chicago White Sox were able to pull it off in the 9th inning. It was a very clutch hit by Andrew Vaughn, a double that was able to get the job done for the White Sox. As White Sox, they did leave 11 men on base, but they got it going in the final 2 innings. Yasmani Grandal was able to get a home run off of Rafael Montero, his first of the season, as Framber Valdez held to just 5 innings in this game, but won 5 scoreless. From there, Brian Abreu was able to give you a scoreless inning along with Hector Neris, but Montero gives up that solo home run, and then Ryan Presley, very sure-handed guy, he gives up 2 runs in an inning himself. Astros were able to rally a little bit in the 9th inning, as you saw Reynaldo Lopez give up a home run to Yordan Alvarez, first of the season for Alvarez, but they just could not get anything off of Dylan Cease. Cease gives up 1 run in 6 1/3 innings, but bigger than that, 10 strikeouts and no walks for Cease. Really dominant performance. Aaron Bummer, not a bummer pair of outside the bullpen, and Kendall Graveman, a scoreless inning as well. For the Pittsburgh Pirates, they were able to hop all aboard Hunter Green, and they get the 5-4 win. For the Pittsburgh Pirates, yeah, Mitch Keller not necessarily give the world's greatest performance. 4 runs surrendered in 4 2/3 innings, but from there, Dory Moretta, Colin Holderman, David Benar, I'll give you a scoreless inning, and this is always a tough name to say, Rob Zanarski. I don't think that there's any vowels in his last name other than the A. He was able to go 1 1/3 innings scoreless, and for the Pittsburgh Pirates, they go 0 of 6 with men in scoring position, but Oniel Cruz was able to hit a home run, and he had the sacrifice fly that won this game. Hunter Green was not long for this game. 8 punch-outs in 3 1/3 innings, but gave up 3 runs, including that home run to Mr. Cruz along the way. Bullpen wasn't bad from there. Fernando Cruz, another Cruz, he walks 3, gives up 1 run in 1/3 of an inning. Everyone else was able to hold on the 4. Buck Farmer gives up a run in an inning, but you have the duo of Alex Young along with Derek Law. They both go 1 2/3 innings scoreless, and then you were able to get a scoreless inning out of Ian Gabot for the Cincinnati Reds. 2 of 9 with men in scoring position, with getting the first home run of the season out of Spencer Steer, but not enough doing for them off of that bullpen to be able to get it done. As you did also see the Toronto Blue Jays and the St. Louis Cardinals put up some runs. 10-9, the Toronto Blue Jays were able to get it done. And Alek Manoah, he was not good in this game. 5 runs surrendered in 3 2/3 innings, including a home run to Tyler O'Neill, his first of the campaign, and you did have from there Brendan Donovan get a home run off of Manoah, his first of the campaign. So Manoah actually gave up 2 home runs. From there, the bullpen, it wasn't great, but it did just enough. Yimi Garcia gives up 2 runs in an inning, and then you've got the combination of Tim Meza along with Anthony Bass. Both give up a pair of runs over the course of 1/3 of an inning, but Zach Pop, 1 1/3 inning scoreless. Eric Swanson, Adam Simber, both gave you a scoreless inning. And for the Toronto Blue Jays, this offense is very, very formidable. No home runs, but they go 5 of 16 with men in scoring position, as Miles Michaelis allows 10 hits, 5 runs in 3 1/3 innings. From there, Jordan Nix gives up 2 runs in an inning. Ryan Helsley gives up 2 runs in an inning. Helsley was really good last year, but fell off towards back half last season. Got to wonder if there's something lingering there. Zach Thompson along Drew Verhagen do give you a combined 2 1/3 innings scoreless, and Andre Palante gives up a run in 1 1/3 innings. So the Blue Jays were able to get that one to the window, and the Marlins could not win the season opener of Sandy Alcantara, 5-3. The Mets get it done. Max Scherzer, he goes 6 innings. He gives up 3 runs, all of which were earned, and quite frankly, he gave up all of those in that 6th inning. I don't think that he probably should have been out there at that point, as he did allow a home run to Garrett Cooper, his first of the campaign, and for Sandy Alcantara, 5 2/3 innings. He gives up 3 runs along the way as Andrew Nardi gives you an out of the bullpen. JT Chargois, 2/3 innings scoreless for Miami, and you did have Uskar Brazobin be able to give you 2 scoreless innings, but Tanner Scott, he just has not lived up to his billing with Miami. He gives up 2 runs in 2/3 of an inning, and for the New York Mets, life without Edwin Diaz is probably going to be tough, but they had Brooks Raley, Drew Smith, David Robertson all be able to lend a scoreless inning. So you got to be feeling good about that, and you've got to be feeling good about the New York Yankees as they're able to get it done by a count of 5-0. For Logan Webb, not necessarily what he was hoping for. He did have 12 strikeouts in 6 innings, but he gave up 4 runs, including a pair of bombs. Aaron Judge, his first home run of the year. He needs just 62 more to break his American League record from last year, and Gleyber Torres was able to go deep in this one as well as Garrett Cole. He was dynamite. 11 strikeouts, no runs allowed in 6 innings. From there, Wandy Peralta, Jonathan Loaizaga, both combined for a scoreless inning, and one of the more underrated relievers in the big leagues, Ron Metanacchio, was able to supply 2 scoreless innings for the Giants, just 4 hits in this one. So we saw a lot of feast or famine offense in baseball, and like I said, the West Coast games are pending as I do this, so I do not have any sort of a report there, but that said, taking a look at baseball right now, we have seen 6 overs and 5 unders to begin the season, so we will certainly see how the trends are working, and with regards to home and road splits, you did see the road team win 6 out of the first 10 games that we saw on opening day once again. Very, very small sample size, but baseball, it is back in our lives, and it is very glorious. I'm looking forward to coming at you guys every single day for the next 7 months on this podcast. And coming up next, let's highlight a few teams and players that might have a little bit of upside this year with Steve Gardner of USA Today. That comes up on the flip side on the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Are you ready to become a winning sports bettor? Schedule a call with SBIA to find out how their service can make you a long-term winning player. They've developed an innovative algorithm that maximizes units return, and they are so confident in their system that they offer a money-back guarantee. Sign up by October 31st and get their MBA package at no cost until they reach 10 net units. They treat sports betting like a business. So if you want to learn how to make your sports betting dreams a reality, visit them at SBIA1.com and check them out on social media at SBIA Sports.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it is great to be joined by our guest, as Steve Gardner does a great job taking a look at baseball over at USA Today. For those of you guys looking for an edge on the fantasy side of things, Steve does a great job there. He does a great job all around of taking a look at impact players, teams that are ascending/declining, does great work all throughout the baseball season. I know that he's put in a ton of work to get prepared for what I think is going to be an amazing 2023 season. And you're able to follow him on Twitter at Steve A. Gardner. So his first and last name with an A in the middle. And Steve, great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, Greg. Thanks so much. So anxious for this baseball season to get going. It should be really fun and really interesting and exciting, maybe even more so than any season we've seen for a while.
Absolutely. And part of it is we're going to be seeing a little bit of a different game this year because games are expected to be faster with the pitch clock, with the batter's clock, what have you. And with regards to all the rule changes that were made, did you have to make any changes to some of the players and or some of the teams that you were evaluating? Because it is quite a bit to take in for just one off season. It is.
And I think the biggest thing is because there are so many variables. I mean, if it was only one thing when we had the designated hitter put in for the National League permanently, I mean, we could see, all right, well, we'll see more playing time for those National League hitters and, their fantasy values and their production should go up a little bit. But with all of these different rules changes, it's really hard to say how they will work together to make it, and affect the game and affect player performances. I will say that some, particular players like, say, a Corey Seager or Kyle Tucker, left-handed hitters might get an advantage, get a little bit more of an edge because some of their hits that turned into ground ball outs last year will possibly be base hits this year. So those left-handed pull hitters stand to gain a little bit. And obviously, if the bases are a little bit bigger and it's a little bit more difficult for pitchers to hold runners on base, the big thing I think we can expect from these rules is a lot more stolen base attempts and a lot more successful stolen bases. So the guys that can run well and can steal bases well, they're going to be more productive.
Absolutely. And do you think that just moving forward, perhaps at the trade deadline, perhaps how teams attack future off seasons, that maybe there is going to be a little bit more of a premium put on guys that they just find a way on base? Maybe they're not slugging 30 plus home runs, but they're doing a good job drawing walks. They're more of like a Luis Arias who went over to the Miami Marlins this offseason, guys that they just find a way to be able to get on base, because I do think that has been something that we've noticed in baseball quite a bit over the most recent few years. A lot more emphasis on the home run ball. Do you think that this could put a little bit more emphasis on, hey, let's try to play station to station, try to get a man in motion?
It's possible. And I think, too, the less publicized changes that we've seen over the last year or so with the baseball could make that more of a possibility, too, because if the baseballs aren't flying as far as they were in previous seasons, then, the run environment goes down and the value of each individual run, i.e. playing small ball, increases. So, yeah, we could see a little bit more of that station to station, steal a base, play for one run instead of the big inning. Those could definitely be in play.
And I do think that that'll be very interesting to look at as well, the baseball itself, because I think that there were a lot of people at the beginning of last year who were like, man, home runs, they seem to be a little bit down. And then when you got a nice sample size, we were able to see that. So it'll be very interesting to gauge the first few days, because I think it'll take a few days to be able to gauge if the baseballs are back to normal, if they're at 2022 standards, or if they're back to like 2019-20 standards. So that is something that I'm going to be watching for, as Steve Gardner, who does great work at USA Today, is joining me on the podcast. And Steve mentioned it a little bit before. You do a great job on the fantasy side of things, and I know you've been breaking down a lot of guys. You've been going through a lot of drafts, trying to build a team that is going to be successful for this year. And just with all of your fantasy work, who are a few guys that you've identified that you think that they're going to be able to perhaps outperform a lot of the metrics that we are thinking for this year? And who are a few guys that you think just have some general value?
There are several of them. My favorite sleeper, if you can call it that, it's hard to say exactly what sleepers are these days because so many people are picking and so many people are examining the numbers and everything. The guy that I really like is Brandon Belt from the Toronto Blue Jays, who was in San Francisco, spent his whole career there, and is moving to the Blue Jays this season, where coincidentally, they're moving the fences in the power alleys, and he goes from a ballpark in San Francisco where it's very, very difficult to hit home runs to one that's going to be a lot easier. And, he's a guy that had a career high 2 seasons ago of 29 home runs in San Francisco and was really a lost season, I guess you could say, last year because he was hurt so much. If he can stay healthy, Brandon Belt in Toronto could be a real big producer who people are overlooking terribly. Some others, I think the Chicago White Sox are going to be much better this season than they were last year. They've changed managers. Tony La Russa is no longer there. And I think some of their players that had disappointing seasons, whether it's Luis Robert at the top of the scale, the talent scale, or guys like Yasmani Grandal, who had a lost season because of injuries last year, I think he's going to have a much better season. And watch out for the rookie Oscar Colas, who made the opening day roster, probably will not start opening day, but will get a lot of playing time there and should be a rookie that you should watch.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned the Chicago White Sox, because I do think that they're such an interesting bunch. They do have a few ailments with regards to the bullpen. The health of Liam Hendricks is very much a question mark, but I think the big key for them is just being able to keep sort of their starting rotation healthy as well, because I remember Lance Lynn was not himself until the back half of the season, and I think that they're a team of very much fascination, because I do think that if they are able to stay healthy, they're able to really ascend. But we have seen this team be quite a bit banged up in recent years, and this year Eloy Jimenez, it feels like, is going to be missing quite a bit of time as well.
That's just been a problem for them, it seems like, all the time, and I don't know if it's a training staff thing. Usually they're pretty good, I think, in avoiding injuries. You mentioned the White Sox. I think Lucas Giolito is another guy that just had a terrible season last year, but his strikeout rates and walk rates were not that different from when he was one of the best pitchers in the majors a couple years ago. So if you look at that White Sox team, Lance Lynn, he's back to 100% health. Dylan Cease had a fantastic year last year. And, Lucas Giolito coming back, giving them 3 really solid starting pitchers. Don't overlook the White Sox this year.
Yeah, but with the White Sox, I do think that they're going to get quite a bit more out of their bullpen this year. And then their guy that is going to be starting day number 2 in Lance Lynn, very good back half of the season after a not so good front end of the season. And let's call it what it is. You and I could have managed the White Sox better than Tony La Russa did last year. So that's an upgrade as well. As Steve Gardner, who does great work at USA Today, is joining me on the podcast. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Toronto Blue Jays as well. And how much should you factor in with the Blue Jays the new ballpark dimensions? Because of all the teams, they certainly had the biggest dimensions changes. I believe that the Tigers underwent a little bit of a dimension change with their ballpark as well. And I do find it to be very fascinating to see what the Blue Jays did, because they actually made the fences a little bit higher, but they pulled them in a little bit more as well. Who do you think that'll benefit the most?
Number one, my guy, Brandon Belt, for sure. But Vlad Guerrero Jr., I think it will help him. It will help Bo Bichette. And I think in general, help the Toronto pitchers too, because not only did they have the changes to the ballpark last year, they also went out and got a couple of really good defensive players in Dalton Varsho and Kevin Kiermaier. So their pitchers, I think, will benefit because those guys can run down balls in the outfield. And, if they're not going over the fence or if they hit off of the walls, those guys can hold doubles to singles. They can catch balls that other, outfielders for the Blue Jays last year, frankly, couldn't get to. So I think a stronger defense there in Toronto, combined with the additional offensive punch, is going to make them a tough team to beat. And in fact, I think they've got a very good chance to possibly represent the American League in the World Series. I
am not too much of a futures player, but one win total that I did like among one of the ones that was a little bit higher up on the board was the Blue Jays at 91.5. I felt like that was one that they should be able to go over on, because along with that as well, the Blue Jays aren't going to need to play as many games against some of the big bomber teams in the American League East. With the schedule changes here, we're going to be seeing a little bit more interleague play instead of playing 19 games against the Yankees, 19 games against the Tampa Bay Rays. Heck, the Boston Red Sox could be resurgent, list goes on and on. They're going to get more games against, say, the Pittsburgh Pirates. Do you think that the Blue Jays are one of the biggest beneficiaries? Because among all the teams affected by the schedule changes, I would say they and perhaps some of those bottom feeder NL West teams have to go up against the Padres and the Dodgers, typically 19 games a year. They're the teams that benefit the most from this.
Absolutely. The tougher divisions, when you don't have to play those division rivals so often, it's a plus in a big way. The American League East and the National League East have been the toughest divisions the last couple of years. And then you mentioned the NL West as well, with the Dodgers and now the Padres becoming such a powerhouse. Teams in those divisions are going to be very happy to play the teams in the Central a little bit more.
I am right there with you. As joining me on the podcast, we do have Steve Gardner, who does amazing work over at USA Today. And Steve, I know that you're based out there more in the eastern part of the country, more towards the DMV, Virginia area. And no doubt about it, you're taking quite a bit of the NL East. I do want to get your thoughts on this team. It is going to be one of those teams that is going to be playing both on Thursday and on Friday, as there aren't too many teams that are going to be playing on Friday, and it is the New York Mets, a Mets team that was really able to rise up last year, but I have more question marks with them than any other team in the big leagues, because we know about the Edwin Diaz injury. That's very unfortunate, and I think that puts them behind the 8-ball quite a bit this year. What are your overall thoughts on the Mets? Because we were talking about the White Sox, and I mentioned that they've got some injury concerns, and I don't think that there's any team that has been more ravaged by injury to this point than the Mets, or have more injury concerns with having aging guys in Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer than the Mets.
Absolutely. I mean, Max Scherzer is 38 years old, Justin Verlander is 40, and those are their top two pitchers. Can they last the entire season? Well, you look at last year, and for the most part, those guys did and had fantastic years. The problem is, will they be able to follow that up? I'll tell you what, I think the Mets have enough depth now. I think that's one of the things that they have done in the Steve Cohen era that has been so much more of an improvement, is they've had the depth. They've got guys like, when losing Jose Quintana out of the rotation, they're able to pull David Peterson in and have him slot into that rotation. They have Tyler McGill, who could possibly come in there. It stepped in for Jacob deGrom last year at the start of the season and was outstanding. So the pitching staff does have a little bit of built-in depth to it. And even though obviously you lose Edwin Diaz, that was huge. But signing David Robertson in the offseason, trading for Brooks Raley, those guys are going to pitch a lot of important innings, and I think they can handle it. So with the Mets, the classic case of you have to nail this win down in the ninth inning. If Edwin Diaz might have gotten 3 or 4 more saves that the rest of the bullpen will blow, I don't think that's going to keep the Mets out of the playoffs. And I think they're strong enough otherwise to make a deep run into October. So you look at Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso and all those guys on offense. This is a very solid Mets team. Kind of still like the Braves a little bit more, but this NL East is going to be a fun race to watch.
It is going to be a really fun race to watch. And Steve, I know you've put in so much work getting set for this upcoming season. We've talked about a few teams already. Is there maybe a few guys / a team or two that we have not addressed that you're either a little bit more bullish / a little bit more bearish on coming into the season, and you expect them to not perform to expectations, whether that be to the positive or the negative?
I have a lot of excitement built up, especially after watching the World Baseball Classic and how Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout did. I think the Angels finally make it to the playoffs this season. At USA Today, we did our preseason composite records and record projections, and the Angels came in at 500 at 81-81. I think this is a better team than that, and I think they've gotten out and gotten the pieces that they needed to fill in. And if they can stay healthy, I mean, Anthony Rendon has not really had a chance to play hardly in an Angels uniform. I think he could be a big contributor to this team. So when you have, Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout on the same team, that's a dangerous squad. And to be able to fill it in with complementary players and a little bit better pitching staff. Tyler Anderson came over from the Dodgers after such a successful season last year. This is an Angels team I think is going to finally break through, and it'll be great to see Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout again in games that mean something.
And under the radar as well, Patrick Sandoval had a nice World Baseball Classic as well. And finally, it looks like there's a little bit of pitching with the Angels. It only took them utilizing every single draft pick a few years ago at pitching to be able to do so. But it feels like they're finally turning the corner. But a man that is always firing all cylinders, a man that doesn't need to turn the corner because he's already done so, always in top-notch form. That is you, Steve. You do amazing work over at USA Today. Let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along in social media and other platforms.
Sounds great. Thank you, Greg. Yes, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Steve A. Gardner. And just go to sports.usatoday.com. We've got a live blog coming up for opening day. It's going to be great. Follow me also if you're into print. You like to read my fantasy column. It's in USA Today Sports Weekly every week.
Yep, I don't get the newspaper every day, but 1 or 2 days a week, I always like to be able to get a little bit of print. USA Today is one of my go-tos, and Steve, he does amazing work over there. Taking a look at the great game of baseball has joined me quite a bit over the years on this podcast and always delivers top-notch analysis, much like he did today. A big thanks to Steve for joining me on the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on all 5 games on the betting board for this MLB Friday as we touch them all.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be able to get Steve Gardner aboard, doing tremendous work over at USA Today, taking a look at the great game of baseball, based out there in the northeast part of the country. So it was great to be able to get him aboard, more around the Washington, D.C. area. I guess that's not northeast, that's more just east part of the country. But regardless, he does absolutely amazing work over at USA Today. Has done a great job getting prepared for the season, and you were able to get a nice outlook on teams and players to be able to look out for this season. So a big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on all 5 games on the MLB betting board for this Friday as we touch them all.
If a game is listed on the betting board, Greg has a side and a total on it, so it is time to touch them all.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter feed at gunit_81. Rotation order is actually very clean with baseball. It'll go National League games first, then the American League games, and then it goes time order with regards to both leagues. Interleague games will be at the bottom, but we do not have any of those today, so we get started with this first game, which is also the DK Nation write-up pick, 901-902. The New York Mets are on the road facing off against the Miami Marlins. Jesus Luzardo goes for the Marlins, and David Peterson, great name, is on the bump for the Mets. The Mets are between a -110 to a -115 favorite. You're finding the Marlins anywhere between -105 and +105. Totals anywhere between 7.5 and 8 on the 8. The under is -115. The over is -105 on the 7.5. Over is -120. The under, it is even. I'm going to be taking a look at it under in this spot. I did set my total and it's 7.2, and that sort of goes with what I'm going to be writing up, and that would be the Mets money line. I set this line more on a -142. David Peterson looked really good in spring training, and he was rock solid last year. Before, he was just mixed around between the starting rotation and the bullpen, and that's been really the biggest thing that has ailed him throughout his career. When you give David Peterson just a clean run, you keep him in the role of starter, or you keep him in the bullpen for quite a long time, he's able to find himself. When you have him go from starter to bullpen, back to starter, back to bullpen, just like most pitchers would, he struggles. But you saw Peterson from the beginning part of the season all the way through the month of August post up a 3.21 ERA. He had 20 total appearances, 16 starts, 10.5 strikeouts, and 0.9 home runs allowed per 9 innings. So he was able to do a great job there before he got mixed around. And David Peterson, during spring training, he pitched 12 innings. He gave up 1 hit. Not 1 run, 1 hit. He was absolutely tremendous. This guy has really good stuff. I think that he's going to be able to break out this year, and goes up against a guy named Jesus Luzardo, who pitched better than his 4-7 record would indicate last year. He registered a 3.32 ERA. He's got good stuff, 10.8 strikeouts per 9 innings. Opponents hit a $191 off of him, but his ailments really came at home. Luzardo in Miami had a 4.25 ERA, with opponents hitting more around at 2.38 off of him. Now, with the New York Mets, no doubt about it, the bullpen did take some losses in the offseason. Biggest one is Edwin Diaz. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, but they're also without Seth Lugo. But what does help out the Mets in this ordeal is that they didn't have to go as deep into the bullpen as I thought they were going to. Max Scherzer, he was able to pitch 6 innings yesterday, so that's rock solid. They did have to use up David Robertson, Brooks Raley, so that does hurt you a little bit. For the Miami Marlins, they had to use up 4 different relievers, including JT Chargois, who's one of their more trustworthy guys. Huascar Brazoban, he had himself a little bit of a rough day yesterday as well, so that was not necessarily too terrific for this bunch of Miami. They were 22nd in the league in terms of bullpen ERA last season, and you've got a guy in David Peterson who faces off against the Marlins team that they were dead last in the National League last year in runs per game and home runs per game at home. They did make some acquisitions in the offseason. Luis Arias, Gene Segura, they're going to be able to move the line a little bit more, but these are far from home run hitters. I know that Jorge Soler a few years ago had that massive year when he was with the Kansas City Royals where he had 48 home runs. He has not hit 48 home runs in the subsequent 3 years since. Now, I recognize that injuries did cost him quite a bit of last season, but he just has not been the same player ever since. And Garrett Cooper, he's a relatively okay first baseman, but the New York Mets, they had the top batting average in the National League away from home last year, and darn near everyone is back. You've got back someone like an Eduardo Escobar, who was a little bit rough towards the beginning part of the season. When he came off the injured list, he looked rock solid. Francisco Lindor came into his own. Pete Alonso had 40 home runs last year, and 2 years ago, he led the league in home runs away from home, and he had out of his 40 home runs last year, 23 of them come on the road. Starling Marte does a good job of being able to move the line. You've got a guy like a Brandon Nimmo, who had a 275 last year, so you've got a lot of nice bats for the New York Mets, and despite the losses that the team took in the offseason, you still have someone like an Adam Ottavino who did not pitch yesterday, so he's going to be good to go in this one. Dennis Santana is someone that could be relatively okay for this bunch as well, so I still think that the Mets have the Marlins outgunned in terms of the bullpen. I really like the way that David Peterson is pitching, so my write-up here is going to be on the Mets money line, and I do like this total under. I do think that Jesus Luzardo is going to come out. He's going to be able to give you a relatively solid start, but I just like Peterson more in this spot. My right up here, that is going to be on the Mets, semi-total at 7.2, so whether you've got a 7.5 or an 8, looking under, right up, that is on the Mets money line. 903, 904 on the betting board. The San Diego Padres are going to be playing host to the Colorado Rockies. It is Kyle Freeland who gets the ball for the Rockies, and Nick Martinez is on the bump for the Padres. And the Padres, they are favorites of anywhere between minus 173 and minus 185. Your plus price on the Colorado Rockies, you're going to be finding that anywhere between about a plus 150 to a plus 160. 8 to 8.5 is the total. On the 8 over, it is minus 120. The under is even. On the 8.5, flip it. The under, it is minus 120, and the over is even. And I did set my total at 7.7. I'm going to be looking at an under, whether you've got an 8 or an 8.5. Big key here is that Petco Park is one of the most pitcher-friendly ballparks in all of baseball. And we got a San Diego Padres bullpen that all of a sudden is very fortified and is very good. As we all know, Josh Hader, when he is on, he is one of the best relievers in all of baseball. But I was alluding to this with the Mets. They lose Seth Lugo, and he goes over to the San Diego Padres. He's a good multi-inning guy. He can really be a good 7th to 8th inning bridge guy. You've also got in the bullpen someone else I like in Luis Garcia, who was able to step up towards the postseason last year. Nabel Krismet is able to be a little bit of a Swiss Army knife guy as well. So I do like the pitching of the Padres, and got a Rockies team that they've always got those demonstrative home and road splits. Led the league in runs per game at home last year. They were the only team to average fewer than 3 runs per game when away from home this season. So that is a big issue. You've got a Colorado Rockies bunch that they just forget how to hit when they're on the road. Like CJ Cron, for instance. He had 29 home runs last year, hit a 260 overall. Just 7 of those home runs came on the road. He hit a 214 on the road compared to north of a 300 at home, and it's just par for the course for this team. They're looking to someone like a Hero Castro to be able to move the line a little bit more. Having Chris Bryant healthy should be able to help them out a little bit, and the demonstrative home and road splits should be coming a little bit later because Colorado has yet to be able to get in those home series, but that still is a big issue that you've got. And for the Padres, they do rip the cover off the ball, but this is also still going to be a bit of a night game. This is going to be a first pitch time of 6:40 p.m. Pacific time in late March out here on the West Coast. Weather has not been too great for hitting, so there is that. But you've got Manny Machado, Juan Soto, a pair of guys I expect to have 30-plus home runs this season. They are going to be without Fernando Tatis Jr. for the first month and a half of the season, but Awesome Kim did a good job of moving the line towards the back half of last season. Matt Carpenter hit north of a 300 when he was fully healthy with the Yankees last year. What you're going to be able to get out of him TBD, but I like his upside, and I do think that the Padres are going to be able to do a solid job of being able to put bat to ball. Rockies just throughout their entire tenure, they've always had a tough time in terms of hitting when they have been away from home. The only issue that you have with the under is whether or not this bullpen is going to be able to step up for the Rockies. Why they've got Nelson Lamet in the bullpen and not starting, I have no idea. I recognize that he's had injury concerns, but Brent Suter is someone that you're looking to in the bullpen. Ty Block, Jake Bird, these are not necessarily great guys. And when it comes to Kyle Freeland, I do think that he's actually going to be able to give you a serviceable start in this ordeal. I don't think that he's going to do anything great, but at the same time, he posted up overall last year a 4.53 ERA, but that is very misleading because at home his ERA was north of 6. We all remember how good he was at Coors Field a few years ago at home. That is not the case anymore, but on the road he was able to supply a 3.08 ERA. He gave up 8 home runs at 87 2/3 innings. Does give up a lot of contact. Not a guy that is going to get a whole bunch of swings and misses, and he did have a rough time against the Padres last year. He was able to go 3-1 against them in 5 starts, but a 6.75 ERA, so that tells a little bit more of the story. But I do think that the Padres are going to be able to catch up with him. I do think that it's going to be rough conditions for hitting, and if you are taking a look at the run line of the San Diego Padres, you're finding it right around a plus 115 in this ordeal, and that is where I am going to be looking with the Padres. I did need at least about a plus 110 run line. I did set my price right around a plus 113, so being able to get plus 115, really the minimum run line I'm willing to take, but I'm willing to lay a run and a half, be able to reduce the juice, and take the San Diego Padres in this spot. I need north of $2 to even consider the Colorado Rockies money line, so I'm going to be looking at the Padres on the run line with this total being north of 8, in some places 8.5. I'm going to be diving under as well, as I set my total at 7.7. 905, 906 on the betting board. It is the Arizona Diamondbacks on their facing off against the LA Dodgers. Dustin May is going to be going for the Dodgers, and Merrill Kelly is going to be going for Arizona. Arizona is anywhere between a plus 155 to a plus 163 underdog. With the Dodgers, you're getting them in between minus 174 and minus 185. 8 is your total. The under is between minus 115 and minus 120. Meanwhile, the over is between even and minus 105. If you're looking at the Dodgers run line, by the way, I am seeing as high as a plus 130, mostly seeing plus 120, but I'm seeing as high as a plus 130, and that is my buy point on the Dodgers. I set my run line to where I need at least a plus 125 to be able to take a shot, but getting a plus 130, I am in. I would need at least a plus 180 to be able to consider this Arizona Diamondbacks money line. And with the Dodgers, they are a little bit diminished with regards to their lineups. I don't think that they're going to have as many multi-run wins as they did last season. They won north of 105 games last season, and I think only 14 of them were by one run. That was just absolutely magnificent, but you still do have a fearsome Dodgers lineup, despite the fact that they are going to be without Gavin Lux this season. Justin Turner down for what? It's no longer in the fold, but I do like the pickup of JD Martinez. Was down with his power numbers last year, but still was able to hit at 275, still has a good eye at the plate. Mookie Betts, you know what he's able to do. He's, in my opinion, one of the most versatile players we've ever seen in baseball. It's a 270, 35 home runs, 80 RBI last season, steals bases. He is a complete package, really good fielder. Freddie Freeman was one of the top guys in terms of getting on base last season. Going to need a little bit more out of Max Muncy, and I know that James Outman does not necessarily have the greatest track record in terms of being up at the big league level, but he's a guy that I think has a lot of upside. They bring in Miguel Rojas, who I think is going to be able to move the line. And for the Arizona Diamondbacks, you've got Christian Walker, who did a nice job of going yard last season with 36 home runs. You don't have a lot of power outside of that. You've got a fully healthy Ketel Marte of the Marte Parte. Does a good job of being able to get on base, but I mean, at this advanced age, what are you going to be able to expect out of Evan Longoria? Towards the bottom of the fold, you saw some nice development out of Corbin Carroll last season, but you're going to need someone like Geraldo Perdomo to be able to step up. And for the Arizona Diamondbacks, I fully expect Merrill Kelly to be able to give you a good start. Now, Merrill Kelly had right around a 3.75 road ERA, and if you take a look at his home and road splits throughout his career, he has an ERA that is north of a full point higher when he is away from home than when he is at home. But his kryptonite last year was this LA Dodgers team. Like every single time he went up against the Dodgers, it was terrible. 0-5 record in his 5 starts with an 8.25 ERA, giving up 22 runs across 24 innings, 6 bombs. The Dodgers hit a 3.30 off of him. There was only one other team that he had north of a 4.5 ERA against, so that is a big giant issue, and that was a team that he had one start against in the Detroit Tigers. So this LA Dodgers team does completely own him. It is a little bit of a new look Dodgers team, but I mean, it's a Dodgers team that they've got a really nice bullpen as well. They've always been in the top 5 in terms of bullpen ERA. Guys like a Caleb Ferguson, Alex Vesia, Evan Phillips, they all had sub-3 ERAs last year. You got Bruce Gradwell, who I really like, and then for Dustin May, you could tell that he wasn't himself last year. He was coming back from Tommy John surgery, so I do think that we're going to see more of the Dustin May that he was prior to the injury. A guy that's able to throw 100 plus miles per hour, was one of the best prospects in all of baseball. The 4.50 ERA across his 6 starts last year, I really don't put a lot of credence into that. He looked relatively solid when it came to spring training, so I put much more stock into how he was looking there, as during spring training, a 2.95 ERA, he was able to get right around 10 strikeouts per 9 innings. I think that he's going to be rock solid in this spot. I do think the Dodgers are going to be able to get to Merrill Kelly in this ordeal. Once again, not necessarily the world's greatest hitting conditions out here on the West Coast, so I did set my total a little bit lower, and I do think that Merrill Kelly is going to figure it out a tad bit more against the LA Dodgers. I just think a big issue for him is a bullpen that is backing him up. Kevin Ginkel actually wasn't terrible towards back half of last season, but you're relying upon guys like Carlos Vargas, Cole Sulzer, not great, Miguel Castro, Andrew Chafin. They're rolls of the dice at this point in their career. I did set my total at a 7.4, so this is a circumstance where I am going to be taking a look at this total under, and with the Dodgers getting anything north of a plus 120 on the run line, we'll take that, set the money line more around to minus 180. I personally am looking at that plus 130 run line to go along with this total under. 907-908 on the betting board. It is the Chicago White Sox, and they hit the road to face off against the Houston Astros. Christian Javier is going to be going for the Astros, and Lance Lynn is on the bump for the White Sox. The White Sox are an underdog of anywhere between plus 140 and plus 146. Meanwhile, with the Astros, you're getting them anywhere between minus 155 and minus 165, and your total on this game between 7.5 and 8. On 7.5, overs between minus 110 and minus 120. Meanwhile, the under, that is anywhere between even and minus 110. On the 8, unders minus 120, and the over is even. With this total, I did set it at a 6.8. I'm going to be willing to dive under. This is a guy in Christian Javier who I think is a dark horse for Cy Young. I know that in the preseason podcast I did with Andrew Cayley, he feels the exact same way with Christian Javier. Just absolutely electrifying stuff, north of 11 strikeouts per 9 innings last season, and it's going up against someone in Lance Lynn that had just an absolutely atrocious start to the year last year, but you take a look at the way that he was able to pick it up towards the back half of the season, he was actually not too bad. The final 2+ months of the season, from August on, he was able to supply an ERA that was sub 2.5 after, it was really, really bad the first 2 months. He had an ERA that was north of 6 in June and July coming off of injury. You could tell that he was not himself. I think that they probably rushed him back a little bit too much, and then he became the Lance Lynn of old. And Lance Lynn, he does a solid job of being able to get strikeouts, not necessarily going to go out there and is probably going to be duplicating what he did last year, a little bit north of 9 strikeouts per 9 innings. He's now 35 years old, so a little bit of an issue there, but command was on point last year, right around 1.5, 1.6 walks per 9 innings. And for the Chicago White Sox, it's going to be about what they're able to back him up with, because Kendall Graveman, we've seen him at his best. He's able to be a relatively solid reliever, but as we know, Liam Hendriks, the main closer for the team, he's been going through cancer. You wish him absolutely nothing but the best, but that hurts this White Sox team. Aaron Bummer, he now has to step up for the team. Joe Kelly, you just have no faith whenever he comes into a game. There's very few closers that you want less of a part of than Mr. Joe Kelly, but at the same time, Jimmy Lambert, Ronaldo Lopez, they were okay in that bullpen. Unfortunately, it just does not compare to the Houston Astros, who were number 1 in the league last year in terms of bullpen ERA. Ryan Standing had an ERA just above 1. Seth Martinez had a sub 250 ERA. You got really good innings out of Brian Abreu, Rafael Montero, Phil Maton, Hector Neris. Every one of these guys to go along with Ryan Presley are absolutely amazing. And then for the Chicago White Sox, it is going to be about those righty-lefty splits, because this is a team that they always light up lefties, but at the same time, they're going up against a righty in this spot. I do think that is going to be hurting them quite a bit, especially with the fact that you do have a little bit of a banged-up team. They do have Eloy Jimenez available. I know that he was dealing with some injuries when it came to spring training, so that is good for them. Tim Anderson, Luis Robert, these are guys that are able to move the line, and they do pick up Andrew Benintendi. Benintendi is someone that was able to hit right around a 300. So all in all, I do think that you've got some firepower with the White Sox, but it's just about if they're going to be able to put that potential together or not having Tony La Russa. I do think that that's going to be able to help them out. And for the Houston Astros, they are going to be still dealing with Michael Brantley being out of the fold for the first part of the season along with Jose Altuve, but even with that, Alex Bregman, Jeremy Pena, these are a pair of guys that do a nice job moving the line. They've got good power. You pick up someone who was with the White Sox last year in Jose Abreu. He always hits 300. He's got good power. I like what he's able to bring to the table. Jake Myers is someone that I think could bust out this year. Kyle Tucker, there's a lot of people I think that he's an under-the-radar MVP candidate. Yordan Alvarez is a guy that could compete for a triple crown, and I'm not even joking when I say that. Take a look at his numbers last season. Other than really Mauricio Dubon and Martin Maldonado, everyone 1 through 7 for the Astros are a big giant threat. I do think that Lance Lynn is going to be able to fare relatively solidly in this spot, but I just think that Christian Javier is so filthy, and I do think that this is one of these spots where you could be seeing it come down to a run game. If you're looking at the run line, you're able to get that on the Houston Astros between a plus 130 to a plus 135. I would need a little bit more. I set my minimum at pretty much a plus 140, so I typically don't like to take chalky money lines like this, but you notice that the Astros won so many one-run games because they were so rock solid with regards to their bullpen, and this is an ordeal where I set the Astros as a minus 164 favorite, so getting them right around minus 158, minus 160, would not want to lay any more juice in this, and typically I don't lay these sorts of numbers, but I'm willing to do it in this spot with the Houston Astros. Lay this number, and between a 7.5 to an 8, I'm also looking under, and we wrap things up with 909, 910 on the betting board. It is the Seattle Mariners, and they play us the Cleveland Guardians. Hunter Gaddis is going to be going for the Cleveland Guardians, and Robbie Ray is on the bump for Seattle. Seattle is between a minus 163 to a minus 170 favorite. Meanwhile, you've got the Cleveland Guardians between plus 140 and plus 152. 7.5 to 8 is your total on the 7.5. Over is minus 120, and the under is even on the 8. Under is between minus 115 and minus 120. The over is anywhere between even and minus 105. And I did set my total at 7.6. I would rather have that 8 under rather than the 7.5 over, because with Hunter Gaddis last year, he had an 18.41 ERA. When your ERA is beyond the year of the Revolutionary War, that is not necessarily too terrific. That was also a 2-start sample size. I don't want to hold his feet to the fire due to 2 bad starts, and with Hunter Gaddis, in spring training, he did not have an 18.41 ERA, so that is very encouraging. He had good stuff at the minor league level. You take a look at what he was able to do in spring training this season, and he put together a 2.77 ERA. He was able to have 11.8 strikeouts per 9 innings and was very solid at the minor league level, so I do think that he's better than those numbers indicate, but Robbie Ray was very good when he was in the city of Seattle last year. A 3.02 home ERA compared to a 4.69 road ERA. The big thing for Robbie Ray is that he would just have so many stretches in a game where he would just have, he would go 6 innings. He would give up 3 runs. All 3 of those runs would come in 1 inning. I mean, it's just absolutely uncanny with Robbie Ray. Was able to put it together towards the back half of last season, but in his 2 starts against the Cleveland Guardians last year, 13 scoreless innings. This has been a Seattle Mariners team that has really owned the Cleveland Guardians. They went 5-1 against them last season, and for Seattle, what I like about this team is that they were able to bolster their lineup. Last year, they just had a tough time moving the line. They didn't have a lot of guys to be able to get on base. Their team batting average was a 230, so they pick up Teoscar Hernandez, who had 57 home runs and hit a 279 the last 2 seasons with the Toronto Blue Jays. They pick up Colton Wong, who's had at least a 249 in each out of the last 6 seasons. They are relying upon Jared Kelenic to be able to pick it up. Has always looked good in the minor leagues, looked very good in spring training, has always flopped when he's been up at the big leagues. So we shall see what happens there. You still have Eugenio Suarez along with Julio Rodriguez, pair of guys that do a solid job of getting on base. Suarez is not going to hit for average, but he does a good job of drawing walks. Rodriguez, he's going to hit for average. He's going to give you 25 plus home runs. I like what he's able to bring to the table. You can expect to probably see a little bit of Colin Moran this season as he tries to rebirth his career as well. And for the Cleveland Guardians, they were second to last in terms of total home runs last season. They do pick up Josh Bell, who looked very good in spring training, and all in all, it's going to be a nice bat for this team. You do have guys that move the line, like Amid Rosario was able to hit right around a 283 last year. Stephen Kwan hit in that neighborhood of about a 280 or so. I do like what he's able to bring to the table. You've obviously got Jose Ramirez, who's been really the main matcher for this team. 29 home runs, 126 RBI last season. And then Josh Naylor, he was very solid for this bunch last season as well. But you do take a look at the Guardians, that lack of firepower it is there. And I feel like these 2 bullpens match up very well with one another. They're both very deep. For the Guardians, Aniel de los Santos is a relatively solid 6th, 7th inning guy. James Karinchak, Emmanuel Clase might be the best 8th and 9th inning duo in all of baseball, but Andres Munoz, he has been absolutely superb for this Mariners team. Penn Murphy, he was able to record an ERA that was hovering below 3 last season. You got really good production out of Matt Brash when he was sent to the bullpen. Paul Sewald is someone that's reliable as well. I really like both of these bullpens. I just think that the differential between Gaddis and Robbie Ray, it is very significant in this spot, which is why I did set the Mariners as a minus 176 favorite. And if you're looking at the run line, I would need at least a plus 135 to be able to take a shot. I'm only finding right around about a plus 125. So this is another circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at a little bit of a chalkier money line. This opened up more around a minus 145. So I would say try to see if this juice can be reduced, if at all possible, on the money line. But I'm willing to ride with the Seattle Mariners because I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game that they are going to pull out because they've got a massive pitching advantage with Robbie Ray. I set the money line at a minus 176, so going to be willing to lay north of a minus 160 money line in this ordeal. Set my total at 7.6, so seeing the 8s, going to be diving under, and I'm going to be riding with Seattle, and that will wrap things up for the Friday edition of the Baseball Betting Show, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Steve Gardner over at USA Today for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Baseball Betting Show, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter timeline at Unit_D1. Keep in mind, letter CM. They mean does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the baseball season, and that means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.